Welcome to this episode of Thrive with Us. Today we're talking about the all-consuming crush, that feeling that we get when we first meet someone, they pique our interest, they're running through our mind all day, and we just can't stop thinking about them and replaying all of our interactions. This is actually a psychological concept, and for that reason, I am joined today by psychologist Dalia to unpack this topic. Welcome, Dalia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to talk about this topic because I know it's such a hot topic, and it's I think everyone's interested to know more about that all-consuming crush and that infatuation that is a very deep humanly experience that we all go through, I think, at least once in our lives.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think everyone can relate to that, whether it's something that's recent or something that might have happened early in the relationship they're in now or in their life history. But we've all been there. Someone catches our attention. We get all starry-eyed when we look at them, when we talk to them, when we tell our friends all about them. So before we dive into what the all-consuming crush looks like and, where it comes from, why don't we define it for our audience?
Yeah, so I think in simple terms, it's that experience of being so consumed and attracted to someone's energy, their vibe, their presence, and it feels almost magical and euphoric to be around them. And it's like they pull you towards them, like it's like a pull of gravity, and it almost feels like it's magical. So you can't really understand it or put it in words. It's more like a all-consuming feeling. And I also think we can also define it as an infatuation, which is a very short-lived, intense admiration that we have towards someone or something.
So what I'm hearing from you use the word magical a few times, which makes a lot of sense. And I similarly said starry-eyed.
Yes.
So how do you know when you're talking to someone if they're in that infatuation or all-consuming crush phase? What does it look like?
I think it looks like, if you want to define it, like it looks like starry eyes. It looks like palms sweating, having the butterflies in your stomach, feeling jittery, thinking about them, where they are, what they're doing, who they're talking to, what's their favorite music. And it's just like that all-consuming thought about them. It's like they're the center of gravity and they take over your mind. And so I think you can clearly see when someone's infatuated and in love with someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you were talking about all of these physical signs. You said jittery, sweaty palms, the starry eyes, all of that. What's happening in someone's body when they're all consumed by their crush?
I love that question because it's actually it changes our brain chemistry. And so similarly to a drug addiction or a substance addiction or even a behavior, when someone's addicted to a behavior, research has shown that it triggers and lights up the same brain chemistry as when we're infatuated with someone. So neurotransmitters like dopamine, which is our reward system, it's responsible for pleasure and motivation, increases. Norepinephrine, which is responsible for all the physical symptoms like jittery, sweaty palms, butterflies, and also the fight and flight response that we get when we're stressed increases. And lastly, also research has shown that the oxytocin hormone, which is also a neurotransmitter, increases, which is responsible for social bonding and attachment. So the same neurotransmitters that are lighting up in addiction are also lighting up when we are infatuated with someone.
So our pleasure and reward centers are very, very active when we're infatuated with someone. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening within our bodies. And then you also reference that there's a lot of stuff that's happening emotionally and within our thoughts. You said that person ends up becoming the center of our thoughts. We think about maybe what they've shared about who they are, what they like, all of those bits and pieces of information that we tend to gather quite quickly in the initial phases of a relationship. But also you alluded to questions of Who are they talking to? What are they doing? So what happens cognitively for people when they're infatuated?
So I think it becomes a bit obsessive, and we see that a lot in the clinic when a client comes in and really describes it as like an obsession, and it's like rumination and a cycle of the same exact thought. Where are they? Who they're talking to? Did they like what I said? Did they like how I looked like on that date? It's constant. It can also lead to some self-judgment and being kind of obsessed with the way we are reacting to them, how we look in our bodies, the way we present ourselves. And so, yeah, it can be really draining.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I think there are two things that came up for me as you were sharing what you see in the clinic, and I'm sure also what you've experienced out in the world. A lot of people are reporting going through this all-consuming crush at various stages of their dating lives. But on the one hand, there's an element of like social anxiety that's coming out,
Yes.
right? I'm entering into a social interaction with someone, and maybe while I'm in it, I'm really, really aware of how I'm presenting, but I work my way through it. However, after I leave, I am going through the play-by-play. And I would imagine for someone who is socially anxious, afraid of being judged because they're really infatuated by this person, that they're really magnifying, emphasizing the things that could have gone wrong and glossing over the things that may have gone right.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also add to that, there's something we call core beliefs in psychology. We all have them. It's that core belief, that gut belief that we kind of feel deep in our core. We learn this belief when we're very, very young through our experiences in the family, in school, with our friends. And an example of a core belief, it's always very simple, is I'm not good enough. And so I see that so many times, and I hear that so many times with my clients and also my friends and family members. That core belief gets really triggered when we go through that play-by-play, what we said, what we did, how we were perceived. And it's especially triggered when we are infatuated with someone, because we're so concerned about how we are presenting and if we are actually good enough.
Yeah, we want to make a good impression. If someone is captivating our attention, we want to captivate theirs. But it sounds like it's really tricky if you do have that core belief, if you also have maybe a fear of rejection or abandonment, that you go through everything that transpired and look at it from the lens of maybe I wasn't enough. And then that sort of connects with the other thing that came up for me, which is something I've seen quite a lot of, and that is monitoring, checking behavior.
Yes.
Right? So that might be the next time that you see that person really being very sensitive and attuned, maybe not always accurately, to some of their expressions, some of the things that they say, but even in the online space.
Yes.
Who are they connected to? Who are they talking to? I see that he or she is online on WhatsApp or on Instagram, but they're not talking to me. Who else are they talking to?
Exactly. I think, oh my God, that's so common, right? Especially in the social media era.
Yes.
WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, it's all there. So social media has really increased that obsessiveness because we're always online most of the time, unfortunately. And our mind is always in overdrive, right? We're always looking at other people's stories, what they're doing, how they're reacting. Oh, he went out with this girl, with that group of friends. And so we're always on alert. And to kind of relate that psychologically, it's the fight or freeze or flee response. It's a stress response. And it's like our brain and our amygdala is always activated on social media, which kind of makes the infatuation even more all-consuming.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that as well is that you can come up with a narrative.
Yes.
And what you look for can easily support that narrative. And a lot of times we're quite funneled in our vision. So if I'm going into a search online thinking that this person is not that into me and that, the crush or the consumption is more one way, I'm probably going to be much more primed to find evidence of that and much more likely to discard it. And then that will then in turn fuel that core belief and probably keep me feeling activated and continue to do the search and so on and so forth. The cycle continues.
Yes, the cycle's never ending, actually. It can lead to burnout, right? And just to kind of touch on the point you just mentioned, so infatuation actually blurs our reality. And so to kind of go back to the brain, so our brain craves predictability, right? So it really needs it. The way we walk, or just the act of walking, is very predictable, right? So our brain fills in the gaps for us and pushes us to walk. It's like riding a bike. So with infatuation, what's actually happening is the person in front of us, who we have a very big crush on, provides us with these fragments of his or her reality. And what our brain does, it actually plays the game of connecting the dots, so connecting the dots. And we, in the end, draw the picture or the image. We complete that image of them the way we want or need it to be. And so now we're going to go into kind of the idea of projection. So we as human beings, we all project our own needs and our desires onto people, right? Especially our crushes.
Yes.
So yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that we gather this information as part of, getting to know someone, but what happens is we want to understand and fit it into a frame. And the frame is not always in line with the reality. Often it's in line with what it is that we want to see. And so in some ways, we're building this fantasy-like image of that person, and that really reminds me of something we spoke about when we were discussing this episode, and that is love is blind.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I know that you're not necessarily up to date on the whole series. I am, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know which of those things is true, but this is something that we see. Yeah. Right? You meet someone through a wall, you take away that attractiveness element, which studies do show is a really important part of falling for someone, of getting the attention to begin with. But people fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
And then what happens? The curtain is lifted.
Yeah. The curtain is lifted and the fantasy cracks. And that's when you feel like your life is shattering. Like the image, the perfect image, the fantasy you had in your brain is just completely shattered, and it can really lead to self-shaming and self-blame.
Yes.
But just to go back to the Love is Blind example, I'm not very well versed in the series, but I think it's a very good example of infatuation and that all-consuming crush experience. So like you said, the participants are each placed in a pod and they speak to each other through a wall. And so very commonly what happens is the participant, the person, actually feels that all-consuming euphoric love instantly. And the viewer, like us, we go like, wow, is that really what happens? Is that realistic? There's a huge question mark, right? What's happening here is the person, okay, so first of all of us as human beings, we have these core essential needs, which are basically our need for safety, our need for unconditional positive regard and love, our need to feel safe, which I already mentioned, and just validation, right? And so we all share these needs. And these are the basis of a secure attachment, which we all really need to thrive. So in these pods, what's happening is these people are projecting their own needs, which probably are, unfortunately for a lot of us, not all of them are met in childhood. And so we really crave them. So the woman is projecting her needs, and then the man is projecting the same exact needs onto her. And the fantasies are syncing. So can you just imagine how all-consuming and magical that experience is when two fantasies are syncing up?
Yes, absolutely. And I think another thing that happens in that context is this generalization process.
Yes.
So we might have the syncing of these fantasies, and we might also find really peculiar coincidences. I don't remember when, but there was one season where, their grandmothers had the same name, and I don't know, they had the same dog name, and all of these very random facts. Now, the fantasy is there, and it's like, okay, if we're so alike on all of these random things, or we're so alike on all of these core values, we must be alike in everything. So dismissing or kind of turning a blind eye to anything that might alert you to a crack in that fantasy, and really hyper focusing on the things that are in line with that narrative.
Yes, and that's exactly what happens in the beginning of any relationship, the honeymoon phase.
Yes.
And it's depicted so perfectly in Love is Blind, because you literally turn a blind eye to everything else. And in fact, you're not even meeting the person in physically, right? You're not even in the same room. So that infatuation happens when you're not even with them in the same room.
And very quickly. I don't know how many
instantly.
days or hours or weeks, but it's only a matter of weeks from the start to the end of the season. So I guess this goes to show that even though this is a very contained reality TV show / experiment, all of us are susceptible to the all-consuming crush. I would say all, if not most of us, have experienced it. And it is normal.
Yes.
It's characterized by things that change in our brains. We have some physiological reactions that you explained. There are some automatic thoughts, some emotional responses that are really stemming from our unmet needs. And then what you were just sharing is there's this concept of projection and fantasy. So all of us, most of us have / will experience this at some point in time. Until when?
Okay, so until the fantasy cracks, right, and reality sets in. So until one person in the relationship does something like a behavior or says something that does not align fully with that image, that perfect image in our minds, right? So it can be, for example, the fantasy is he will hold me when I need him to, when I'm struggling. And that one day, my partner, let's say, was withdrawn and was super anxious. And so he couldn't do that. And so that instantly, because the fantasy is so magical and euphoric, instantly it cracks, and it feels like it's a pit in your stomach, right? It's like a slap in the face, or like a bus just hits you, and you realize, oh my God, I'm so ashamed that I expected this from him and he did not provide. And so why does this keep happening to me? Am I the problem? Am I not good enough? Am I a bad person?
Yes.
And the rumination goes on and on.
So eventually something is going to happen, because the all-consuming crush is predicated on fantasy. Maybe some of it is true, but there's a lot of stuff that's sort of filled in that is not in line with reality. Eventually our bubbles get burst, and it sounds like that experience for the person whose bubble gets burst can vary. There can be that moment of recognition that, oh my goodness, this person is not who I thought they were. That might lead you to look at them in a very negative way, rather than seeing it as, okay, our relationship is maturing. This person has pros and cons. Maybe it's a situational factor. Some people might then go kind of the opposite. And there can be an element of, what's wrong with me to be so silly, so naive that I actually expected this to be true?
Yes, exactly. And I just want to say something about relationships and modern dating, and just I think this is such a sensitive topic that we all kind of need to talk about. It's essential, right? Relationships are the reason why we're alive. We're social beings. We need to be in some type of relationship, a friendship, a romantic relationship. We just can't survive without them. And so when reality kicks in and we're disappointed in our partner, the real work here is to repair a rupture. And I always say that emotional intimacy is built in conflict.
Yes.
right? So if conflict doesn't exist, you're not really emotionally intimate with your partner.
No,
Not at all,
not at all.
actually. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. And I don't think people really realize how important it is to have conflict in relationship. That's when the relationship is tested, and that's when you can really show up and choose your partner, choose the love you both agree on and you both want and need, and staying and be consistent with your behavior. And I always say the best thing you can gift your partner and the relationship is to look inwards and really work on yourself, your self-awareness, your patterns of behavior, what you're attracted to, what kind of person are you attracted to. So also a good exercise is to kind of think about your exes. What similarities do they have? Are they all the same kind of like? What do they share? They can be both withdrawn. They can be more on the anxious type. They can be really secure. Just kind of start thinking about that to learn more about yourself.
Yeah, no, I love what you just shared. There are so many different layers to that. And starting with the first thing, I think it's really important to emphasize to people, conflict is not a bad thing. And for me, as someone who does couples therapy, actually, the most concerning thing that I see is when a couple comes in and says, we never fight. We never fight about anything. Because like you just said, what level of emotional intimacy is possible when there are no disagreements?
Yeah.
And the thing about conflict, it gets a bad rap. People think it needs to be hostile, it needs to be volatile. It doesn't. Conflict ultimately is one or both people saying, I have a need that's not being met. And it's a chance to express it. Obviously, some ways are healthier and more readily received than others, and to work through that. And then the other thing that I think is really critical here is in a relationship, there's, whether it's a romantic or a platonic, but let's stick with the romantic.
Yeah.
There's two people. There's each person as well as the partnership. And it can feel more natural and easier to kind of always look at what the other person can or should be doing differently. But our power is in understanding ourselves and making decisions about our actions and about our reactions. So this piece around self-awareness and introspection, I think, is really important. And we can reflect on what our histories were in terms of our attachment in our families of origin or the homes in which we grew up, and then how that's playing out in the various romantic relationships and even friendships too, right?
Even friendships. Yeah, exactly. I love how you summarized all that. It was very on point. And I also want to share Charles Darwin, an evolutionary psychologist, also said something that I think is so essential for everyone to hear. The species that survives is not the species that is the strongest or the most intelligent. It's the species that actually is able to adapt to change. And that's so important, I think, in relationships, in human relationships, in romantic relationships. It's your ability to adapt to changes and to flow with them, not against them.
Yeah, because change is the only constant.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So we need to work with it, and it is an opportunity, and we can invite ourselves to kind of look inward. So if anyone is listening to this and wondering, how am I showing up in relationships and what are some of my patterns? What would you ask them to reflect on? What should they start thinking about?
I think, first of all, think about the person you are crushing on, okay? How does that person meet your needs? How do you think they meet your needs? The fantasy always tells us more about the person rather than the person they're fantasizing about. And so idealization is actually like a mirror, right? So really look inwards and kind of look at what that person is providing or you think they're providing. Is it excitement? Is it safety? Is it care? Is it validation? What is it? And then when you kind of pinpoint these needs, you can look at yourself more clearly and in a more realistic way, and kind of lead your life in a way that meets your needs, either internally or in a relationship eventually.
So let's say you're doing this thought exercise and you come to the realization that whenever you feel really consumed by someone in the early phases of a relationship or getting to know them, you're drawn and captivated by someone who's always complimenting you.
Yeah.
You're so smart. You're so beautiful. You're so interesting. Ha ha ha. That's like the funniest story I've ever heard. What does that tell us about ourselves if that's one of the things we're drawn to?
So I think that tells us that we seek validation, right? And reassurance, which is a normal human needs. And so when your body and your brain lights up when someone compliments you, you crave that, right? So maybe you need more of that in your life. And maybe you can also look at your childhood in therapy and kind of see where that was lacking and how that affected you and what patterns you learned to adapt back then that might not be as adaptive right now as an adult.
Yes. And I think, we were saying that this all-consuming crush happens at the beginning, but obviously the bubble is going to get burst because this is never sustainable, whatever part is real and whatever part is more of a fantasy. But imagine that you find yourself in this relationship and you love the validation, and like 2 years later, this person is still like, oh, I could watch you eat pasta all day. You are just the smartest, most interesting, most funny person.
Yeah.
Is that even a good thing? Will the person that wants validation even enjoy that at that point?
That's such an interesting question. My gut is telling me to tell you no, because I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah.
Even the example you gave about the pasta is funny, right? It sounds ridiculous.
It does.
Because really no one does that.
Except at the beginning.
Except at the
Sometimes you
beginning.
find that happening.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't want this conversation to kind of discourage people.
Yes.
Because I know couples who have been together for like 20 years, 30 years. Those the grandpa and the grandma who like hold hands and they cross the street together. And I always look at them and I'm like, wow, that's real love, right? And that's not filled with admiration and validation, reassurance. That's really filled with consistency.
Exactly.
And showing up for the other person and being a safe space for that person.
In a non-performative way.
Exactly.
And that can be one of the shifts that happens as a relationship matures, because obviously every relationship is different. It's made up of different people. Even the same people, if they repartner at a later point in time, they're different people. There's so many different moving parts. But at the beginning, most of us want to show up as the best version of ourselves. Most of us are wanting to be the person that we care about wants us to be. So there is an element of performativeness that can happen. As the relationship deepens, as we move away from infatuation, as the companionship, the friendship, the commitment, all of that, it becomes more real.
Yes.
What you're describing of grandma and grandpa, like walking around the park, holding hands, that sounds like a real expression of we're here together in this moment. Or maybe one to the other person being like, I know you love holding hands, and here you go.
And
this
here
is
you go,
my gift for you, but not the over the top, laying it on thick thing that tends to happen in the early phases of the relationship.
Yeah, and even when you imagine the image of the grandma and the grandpa in the park, your nervous system calms down, right? So that is an indication of how that love feels like. It feels safe, it feels calm, it feels settled. And that's actually the end goal of a relationship. Your nervous system is your best friend. Always listen to your body. The brain-body connection is amazing.
Yes.
It tells us a lot, and we feel everything in our bodies. And so also just a tip for the listeners, when you're with a partner or someone you're dating, notice how your body feels. Notice if you feel safe with them, if your body feels good. This is a great indicator.
I agree with you. And so one of the scenarios that we talked about now has to do with the need for validation. What about another example? So if I'm someone who finds that I always go for the person that leaves me guessing. Are they going to call? Are they not going to call? Are they going to ask me out? Are they not going to ask me out? Are they going to call back the next day or the day after? This very hot and cold.
Yeah.
And I like that. Maybe if it was too much and too consistent, like in the first example, I might find it a little too predictable and a little too boring. What does it say about my relational pattern and my history if I like this hot and cold?
Yeah, that's very common, right? The hot and cold idea just sounds exciting, right? So I would say that person is seeking some adventure, some excitement, some adrenaline, right? And I would also add to that, there's this sense, I want to say, of addiction to stress and addiction to always be hyper aroused. So we have this concept in psychology of window of tolerance, right? So that's where our body feels settled, relaxed, able to regulate. And then there's this hyper arousal when we feel panicky and anxious, and our body feels like it's on, right? Hypo arousal is when we're more depressed, more isolated, more detached. And so that person, to me, sounds like a person who is more comfortable being hyper aroused and really functions that way. And so he or she has been so accustomed to be in these types of environments that it's hard for them to not be. It's hard for them to be with someone who's more consistent, more stable, more safe. And that's something to look at in therapy or not even therapy, between you and yourself.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a really important point because as you're describing this, I would imagine a lot of people listening are thinking, well, who would want that? That sounds awful, to be in the hot and the cold and to be constantly guessing. And I think the point we want to underscore here is that we find comfort in what's familiar.
Exactly.
So if that's what we're used to, even if it's also and is now and has been unsettling in the past, it's what we know. And a lot of times we recreate and we replicate those patterns.
Exactly. And that reminds me of why it's so hard and so difficult to get out of a toxic relationship. It's because the cycle is so familiar to some people and so addictive, and so it's really innately, it's hard to be used to something else that's more that's unfamiliar or more stable. And yeah, it's very contradictory, but this is the reality of it. We're used to we seek actually what we're used to.
Yes, absolutely. Even if what we're used to is destabilizing or difficult in some ways. So we talked about infatuation being something that's normal, and eventually the bubble gets burst, the fantasy gets broken. There are all of these kind of ripple effects on the individuals as well as the partner. How long does it last? And should someone be concerned if they're staying in that for too long?
So concerned, I would actually kind of look at the relationship and from the outside and see, wow, are we really just kind of resistant to live in reality? What is it about our relationship that we're so drawn to, like that fantasy? Why is it so difficult for us to remove ourselves from that fantasy? And that can be because of very different reasons, because the fantasy is just, it's just easier to be in than reality and real life. And our tolerance to conflict or to change might be very, very small, and very, we might be intolerant to change and arguments and just reality. And that's why maybe some people prefer to live in these fantasies. And so it really depends on the couple, how long this lasts, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think there's any rule of thumb because there are so many contributing factors to it. But what I'm hearing from you is that if someone is in a relationship and it's been quite some time and it still feels like this quote unquote perfect honeymoon-ish type thing, it is again an invitation to reflect on why.
Yes.
What is preventing us from going deeper? Because as you said at the beginning of our conversation, ruptures are a really, really important part of the development of a relationship and to come closer together. People often want to avoid them because they think that it might be the end, or signal the end, or expose them to the things that they might be concerned about, like the rejection or the abandonment, or, all of these different things. But it can be really important. So why are you resisting? Are both of you resisting? And what kind of work can we do to move it forward?
Yeah, what's the underlying cause of this resistance? So I always kind of want the person to highlight the resistance, not as a bad thing, but just as information and as a mirror to you and your partner to look deeper. And I just want to say one more thing about repair. I think it's the repair of the repair that makes love durable. That's so important. It's the feeling of having repaired a rupture that really allows a relationship to succeed.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It is really, really critical. And I think it's something that comes quite naturally a lot of times in parent-child dynamics, but much less so in the romantic relationship. And so I think we need to shift the way that we look at conflict, and again, to see it as an opportunity for closeness and to really focus on the repair. And this idea of, okay, well, it's over now. One or both of us is not mad anymore. That's not the end.
No,
if you don't close it up, it's going to keep coming back.
Yeah, it's going to keep popping here and there in the future in one way or another.
And bigger and worse, because the resentment, it has a little bit of a cumulative effect. So you were saying before, and you used air quotes when you said toxic relationship, because I know this is a bit of a buzzword expression that's going around. But let's shift gears a little bit and let's put ourselves in the shoes of a friend. Okay? You're friends with someone who has had a pretty unsuccessful romantic life, really wants to like partner and find, quote unquote, the right person. And now they're in this relationship with someone. And to you, it looks like all-consuming crush written all over it, like written everywhere. But this person just cannot see it. What do you do?
So as a friend?
Yes.
Okay, so as a friend, I wouldn't jump in too quickly to burst her bubble. I'm assuming my friend is a girl. So not to jump in too quickly, because I think that's going to create more resistance and she will most likely push me away and that will create some conflict between me and her. I would actually be patient to see the inevitable time when a crack is going to happen. I can gently kind of tell her my opinion, very gently kind of like point out the imperfections I see in her partner and see what she thinks and kind of not to challenge her, but to kind of pull her towards a more realistic view of her partner.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, because I think in general, even if we see something in a certain way, and even if our motivation is we really want to protect and support someone because we care about them very deeply, at the end of the day, number one, we don't have all of the information. And number two, even if we give them all of the information and it's like a ironclad set of evidence and proof, if they're not ready and willing, then nothing is going to change other than potentially creating a rupture between you and that person.
Exactly. And there's a saying also, Dr. Gabor Mate always says, you can't force someone to change a behavior, a thought, really anything. You have to be patient enough to see when that person is ready to realize or to want to change, and really just be there, just be there as a support system. Express that I'm here when you need me, when you decide to change, when you decide to see the version of him that's more realistic, let's say, I'm going to be there for you. Can't really force it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Okay, so a little bit of of patience, a little bit of like gentle interjection,
Yes.
depending on what the relationship style is like. And that's something you would do whether or not you're a psychologist, right?
Yes, just as a friend. As just a friend. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes that, I don't know if it's your experience, but I think a lot of people that know me or know of me just have this assumption that I'm just kind of there, like watching and observing what other people are doing with my notebook and my glasses and being like, well, this is how it should be.
I
It's
literally
not
have
the case.
Yeah, it's not the case.
At
and
all.
it's literally my experience as well.
Yeah.
Because whenever I'm out with friends,
Yeah.
it's always, what do you think?
Yep.
What are your thoughts on this guy? What are your thoughts on this girl? What are you analyzing now in your head?
Yes.
It's like, I'm literally not analyzing anything. I'm just out and I'm having fun. I'm just a human being.
Yeah.
Just Dahlia, not a psychologist right now. So yeah, I think it happens with every single psychologist. Yeah.
Okay, so infatuation, like we said, happens and eventually the curtain gets lifted, the bubble is burst, and all of that kind of stuff. Let's say we make our way through it. We now see the cracks. We aren't beating ourselves up because still the good is kind of outweighing the bad. And we're like, I still kind of like this person, maybe even love him or her, despite the fact that they're not exactly what I thought. How do we then move into a healthy relationship that is likely to stand the test of time?
So, first of all, I want to say that each one of us has these non-negotiable needs, right? Non-negotiables. Like, for example, I want to be with someone who is able to provide me with safety, validation when I need it, support, unconditional support. Some people like to be with people who are funny, who are exciting, who have a sense of humor, who are bright. So really being clear on these non-negotiable needs is so important. And then as the relationship continues and we're in this healthy part, the one you were describing, I think really understanding that that person that you chose is going to meet these needs, hopefully, because you chose him or her. And then there's this 15% of imperfection, of human imperfection, right? So when he or she is messy, when they're not on time, when they lose their temper from time to time, when they withdraw. And I think what's important here when we're in this healthy phase is to really look at a relationship as if it's 85% what we need and what we want. And then there's this 15% of leeway, of human imperfection, my imperfection and his imperfection. We're both imperfect. And we kind of need to accept the fact that he's going to sometimes be messy. He's not going to be on time. He's not going to pick me on time every single time for a date night or if we were going out with some friends, right? Sometimes he's not going to be as talkative as I want him to be. And so I need to kind of realize that I need to accept that in him and kind of stop projecting that need of perfection and the need to have it all. Because that can be so, I think, just it can make you sad, right? It can disappoint you.
You're setting yourself up for failure when you think that you're going to get someone that is going to be perfect and perfectly fulfill all of your needs all the time. We don't even perfectly fulfill all of our needs all of the time ourselves. And I think this emphasis on the non-negotiables is really important for a number of reasons. And I think that anyone who is not partnered and wanting to be partnered should really put some time and energy into thinking about what is a must-have, what is a nice to have, because there is a difference. And then really trying to filter when they meet someone and if needed, just discontinue that exploration process when one of those non-negotiables is violated. And what I've seen time and time again is that people, again, they're in this fantasy stage of, it's okay, maybe it's not that important to me, or maybe I'll get him or her to change. But that's very difficult to do. And when you're deeply in love and in an embedded relationship, it's much more difficult to get out of it than at the beginning stages.
Phase,
At the same time, I think what's really important is that you might have something that's a nice to have now, or in your 20s, or, at the beginning of your career, or before you have a family. And then as you grow and change and evolve, so does that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the partner will also be going through their own change and growth and evolution. And I think coming together and kind of talking through things, naming things,
Yes.
rather than letting the resentment build up, the unfair expectations, is an important way to try to proactively manage it.
Yes, and I love what you said, proactively manage it. You kind of have to choose every single day, choose your relationship. And the relationship it has to be important enough for you to show up every single day consistently in the bad times and in the good times. Love is a choice in the end, right? And I think I really want to say that again. Love is a choice. You're choosing to love a person. You're choosing to be with them. You're choosing companionship above all.
And I think, sometimes when we're going through a difficult phase, and all of us have that in all of our relationships, there are some times that are easier, some seasons than others. We can try also to be mindful of how we're making attributions and interpretations.
Yes.
If you're let's say that being punctual, you raise that as one of the things. For me, that's an important thing. I'm very punctual, and I expect people to be punctual, but at the same time, even the most punctual person is late sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
And so, attributing that lateness to a situational or some kind of circumstantial, giving them grace, understanding that maybe it was outside of their control, will help soften the blow, rather than the interpretation of, well, I'm not that important.
Yes.
They're doing this to me. They don't value or respect my time.
Exactly, yeah. And to add to that, I think kind of practicing a way of communication, right? So that's what you're saying. Start the conversation with the good things your partner does and consistently does, that it's so easy for us to forget the little things, right? Start with that, and then you can bring up the punctuality and the annoying things that they don't do or that they do, and really bringing in the positivity in the beginning of the conversation can really soften the blow.
Totally.
And then adding on to that conversation about, I don't feel comfortable when you're late, for example, and always kind of gear towards I statements, right?
Yes.
So I feel uncomfortable that you're late. Okay, so yeah.
I mean, we definitely need positive interactions to buffer. If you're in any sort of dynamic and all you ever hear is like nitpicky criticisms, you're not going to listen anymore.
Exactly.
And eventually it's going to be really ineffective and just a very draining interaction. But if you know that this person recognizes and sees the good things in you too and feeds that back to you, whether you're someone who really needs the validation or not, it helps. And I think, you were saying from the beginning of this podcast that a lot of what happens, it's coming from a need. Yeah. So I said, and you said about this whole punctuality thing. What does it mean to me when someone is punctual? It means to me that they respect my time, and that we agreed on something, we gave our word. Obviously things happen and there can be allowances, but overall you respect my time. You don't think that your time is any more important than mine.
Yes.
And so if I can say, rather than you're always late, you've got terrible time management, blah, 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 blah. And it's more like, you know what? I understand things happen, but it's happened quite a few times, and my time is just as important as yours.
Yes.
It's a very different message.
It's a very different message. And I experienced this differently. So I felt more centered in my body when you said it that way. So imagine how couples experience that.
Yeah, so the way that we say things is really important when the veil is eventually lifted.
Veil is lifted, exactly.
And we're out of this all-consuming crush phase. Okay, so we've talked about the life cycle of the all-consuming crush, as well as what it looks like to transition into a healthier relationship, one that hopefully will stand the test of time, what that feels like, what that looks like, some of the skills that we can practice individually and together. Is there anything else that you would like to add before I pull out my phone and hit you with my quick fire questions?
Okay, I'm excited for that. I think just very quickly, I get asked this question very often. Should I settle for him? Am I settling for her or for him? And so I just kind of want to challenge the listeners to kind of really ask yourself, what does settling actually mean? Can you define settling? So in my opinion, okay, so we're not really settling for someone when he or she meets our non-negotiables, but messes up every once in a while with like punctuality, for example, or messiness. But we are settling for someone in a negative way when they don't meet our non-negotiables. We don't feel safe with them. We're unable to repair anything. We're unable to communicate, right? And that's really what's settling. So I think I kind of want the listeners to kind of redefine the way they think of settling, because it's a very common question to ask. And we're all like, am I settling? It's always... we're never really sure, but I think when you think of your non-negotiables, that's a really good way of kind of recentering yourself and really making a decision.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you said recentering, and what comes up for me with all of that is that it is like your compass. Your non-negotiables are your compass. When we were talking about it earlier, maybe your nice to haves might change, but a lot of the non-negotiables are embedded in you from the time you're younger, and those are things that you will carry. So orienting yourself to those, and then being mindful, I think, of the social clock. Right? It's very difficult when you hit a certain age, and you see that everybody else is partnering up, and there's this fear that we have sometimes of being left behind and missing the boat. So I want to just grab anyone. But for you, what you're saying is it's not settling if that person that you're meeting and maybe feel pressure to accelerate things with is ticking those important boxes.
Yeah, so what you're describing is kind of like the bio of the description of a satisfier rather than a maximizer. So a maximizer is the type of person who really wants to maximize everything. The perfect girl, the looks, the attitude, the personality. She has it all. And if we keep searching for that girl, we're never going to find her.
Good luck.
Good luck, exactly. Or that guy. I want us to kind of look at it in a different way. A satisfier is someone who finds that person who meets their non-negotiables and is willing to commit and is willing to be consistent and put effort and repair ruptures when they happen and just kind of invest in that relationship. I think that really provides hope for people in modern dating.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Knee-jerk answer or reaction. I blurred those two together. Number 1, crush or chemistry. Which one fools us faster?
Crush.
What's more addictive, the person or the potential?
The potential.
If infatuation had a sound, what would it be?
I don't know, like, wow, like something like that.
Yeah. You know, as you were doing it, I imagined that literally the starry-eyed emoji that you have on your phone.
Exactly.
Which neurotransmitter would you blame for bad dating decisions?
I think dopamine. Yeah.
Is it possible to be addicted to being desired?
Yes, definitely.
What breaks the fantasy faster, truth or time?
I think truth.
In Love is Blind, what do people actually fall in love with?
The image, the fantasy of the person they're talking to.
What's the one thing that instantly kills a crush?
I think the first mishap, like the first wrong answer, the first behavior that really doesn't align with the fantasy.
Can you have butterflies and boundaries?
Yes.
And finally, what's the best cure for an all-consuming crush?
I think self-awareness and really looking at the fantasy as a mirror to you and really settling in with yourself and being truthful to yourself.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was really nice.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
It was.